around the superintendent principal that you're clear about what that will look like at the retreat?
I believe so. I seem to have inadvertently locked myself out of the system, so I'm going to do it here and I'll get back in.
I'll be dead.
Yeah, so my takeaways were that the board supported the 5 district goals for 2015-16 that I submitted, with the request that I perhaps flesh out in a bit more detail both the rationale for the goals as well as some of the deliverables that could be expected throughout the year. I'm prepared to do that. And then with respect to my own professional growth goals, that those be tied back to the specific criteria in last year's evaluation that may have indicated a need for improvement. Certainly happy to do that as well. Did I miss
Do you
anything?
remember? Yeah, I didn't hear you say this on the superintendent president group, SPG.
Yeah.
Remember, I thought it would be a good idea to possibly put in some detail about the work
Right.
that's going on with that group.
Yes, and I do have some notes.
Okay.
Eric Murray is very good about sending out notes after our meetings. I'm happy to share those, and it just kind of summarizes some of the key work areas that we're looking at.
If the other organizations that you're associated with had some key work to cue into the community, you know, what the focus is, that would, I think, be a helpful piece of information, and for the board as well. If it's a simple thing, I mean, I don't know that it would be for all of those organizations, but I thought it was really interesting to hear about the SPG group and the work that they're doing.
Right, so the only thing that's, and did
We haven't
The
had a discussion
discussions.
about this at a board meeting when you finish putting the bullet points, Larry, and the added language.
Yeah, so what I intend to do, since these would be district goals, I will revise them as we've discussed, the district goal portion of it, and I will put them on a future agenda, hopefully the September 8th agenda for the board to consider.
Does that have to be, was the timeline on that had to be approved by the end of August?
It says approved, it says discussed and agreed upon.
The end of
which I-
August?
Yes.
So we've discussed and agreed upon it.
we agreed in essence,
Okay.
and we're just looking for a little bit more fleshed out.
We'll all see that in the board briefing, the final kind of document before.
Yeah, I hope to complete that tomorrow.
Okay, yeah.
And so the question is, do you want to, obviously none of us are fresh enough to attack board goals at this point. Did you want to add that to the retreat agenda? If I tried to call Trish before the meeting, but she has a meeting, I think, on the same schedule we do. So I don't know time-wise, but would you like to add that?
Board goals of the retreat agenda, September 8th.
Thought, we just said that he was going.
Those are the district goals and superintendent goals, but we're talking about board goals.
Right.
Which we already discussed a lot of it today, we just didn't put it down in, didn't we?
And I think we were going to go back and look at the
Evaluation.
evaluation. Right.
Correct. Can we get another, can Cindy send us another, I don't want you to have to print it all again, but is it on the ESV?
Yeah, it's probably more likely in the emails.
Oh, it's attachment on an email. Maybe Cindy could just resend me that with the attachment.
April, May?
Either let us know what date that was or resend it.
Keep talking, I'll find it.
Yeah, just, I don't want you to have to reprint it, but email's great.
An invitation to keep talking. Oh,
So it sounds like board goals on September 8th?
PMA, social media, and the board goals.
Would it, do you guys want me to send out the link to the Board of Extinction?
Yeah.
From Lost since I already
Yes.
pulled that up? Okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
And did you all get the email? I don't know if it was just participants in the study that was.
Is that the Metropolitan?
Yes. Yeah. That was a pretty interesting read as well.
Right.
Document that was, yeah. Some some good information on,
You can send us whatever, you can send me whatever link if it has to do with, I'd like to read if it has to do with that.
it was interesting.
Then are we going to also bring to the table at that retreat, some of the things we talked about, our ideas of professional development, since it becomes, we talked about the difficulty with the 5 of us and the Open Public Meetings Act. I know Caprice gave us some ideas, and maybe we might think of some ideas on our own. Maybe we could get some individual, what book we might want to read next. I mean, I'm not sure. So maybe we can all kind of brainstorm on that.
As a board goal.
Yeah, as one of our goals, but Larry was asking for some of the specifics of what are we going to do for our professional development around diversity and equity training, which we started
Okay.
today as a board.
Yeah, which was great too.
And you're okay starting that now, and you don't feel like we need to wait till the new board comes on?
I mean, honestly, I think the board goals, we should wait till a new board. I mean, same thing. I mean, so I think the protocols are a policy that bind a board and that they should have input, but I don't disagree that they should have input on the board goals too. So I don't want to seem inconsistent because I think both of those are important. I was kind of afraid to say it, so thank you for
I
saying
have
it.
some goal suggestions, and then the new board could say, here's why those were suggested goals, and then confirm it when the new board comes on. Wouldn't that be a way to kind of blend both of those things? And then new board members could say, no, I think we need further discussion on it, or, gosh, you guys are brilliant, let's agree to those.
That's true, because you bring up a good point. Dawn and Sandy probably aren't going, I mean, I'm not saying you're not engaging in any equity and diversity training, that you two, that's not important, but we're
I'm
getting
not
close to the
going
end.
anywhere. You can't get rid
No,
of me that easy.
Janet and Dawn.
That's Sandy, yeah.
I'm not Janet.
I know,
But,
I knew what you meant.
I mean, the time is limited for, as a board, for all 5 of us to engage again. We're getting to the end of,
Right,
We good?
yep, let's
So
move on.
I have resent you the self-assessment from May, and just for my own clarity on the discussion, can we reiterate, I'm sorry to prolong the conversation one more time, what the agenda is for May 8th? Or September 8th?
OPMA, social media,
Social media and OPMA, okay,
and board goals.
okay, and board goals.
Oh, I thought you were just sending us
And,
information.
Well, we could have like a
And a
5-minute
discussion
conversation.
about disability information that
Okay,
you're sending. Right.
civility, policy, civility, practice.
All right, next item on the agenda is future agenda items.
I interrupted earlier the conversation about the situation in Bellevue. Do we want to get more information, or did you feel like you got your questions answered?
Certainly wouldn't feel like I got the questions answered.
Okay.
I mean, it's, what kind of internal checks are we doing on that kind of thing? I keep hearing these things that sound like an internal auditor. Maybe that's what I really think we ought to have a conversation about as a future board item, is an internal auditor that could keep up with these things without, looking out and seeing Lydia do this, well, this is the only way we can get that. And that's pretty time consuming looking to get that kind of information. I kind of wonder if these different things don't lead to that discussion. But certainly, at least a future board discussion item about that. And I think that you could also add in the conversation about someone who can audit those kinds of things or look into questions like that if suddenly Bellevue is putting children through private school from their booster club money, that someone could easily answer, no, and here's how we follow that or track that. It might be a good idea.
And is there board consensus on that?
I definitely, anytime other districts make the front page of the paper, that's always a question I ask of, okay, are we sure we're not endangered? So certainly information of how we verify that we're not paying, our booster clubs are not paying to put kids through
So
private
kind of
school.
a reporting on what checks and balances we have. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
That'd be great.
I think that's a good discussion to have, is like, well, do we have it? What do we use those on? And how can we be proactive about, before it's a newspaper? So that we're not on the dais saying, gosh, do we do that? And I think it's a good idea to have that discussion, some kind of check going on there. Okay.
We had the families represented here about principal evaluation. So my takeaway from that was a broader discussion about principal evaluations district-wide, and are we using a tool that gets at community opinion or community perspective of the principal. And so I'd like to add that to the discussion. I know that Larry was going to get us some information particular to Kokanee that had been asked for, but I'm also would be curious, you know, are we doing it different at each individual, the community piece of the evaluation? Because what they referred to, the parents from Kokanee, was that the way that they evaluated the community perspective, I guess, was by the principal gathering the information, his or herself, and presenting that to the administrators, and not, for example, doing a survey or going out to the community independent of the principal. That's what I heard.
So what is your agenda request?
So my agenda request is how are we, I want to talk about how are we doing the principal evaluation when it comes to that community piece as a district.
Is there board consensus on that?
I'd like to get it in a board briefing and see, you know, I have to be honest, I want to make sure that the district is following RCWs for sure, but I'm leery about me as a board member getting too into the evaluation of an employee. But
I want to evaluate one employee, I said.
Right.
And look at our policy in comparison to that.
I think it could be an interesting conversation to have about all of the levels, not just the principal, but in the evaluation process for all of our staff. It's a very people-oriented job, every single one of them, and I think it would be interesting to know how we're addressing that component in our evaluations currently, and maybe have a conversation about how could we improve that.
yeah, if we're talking on a systemic level, I'm okay on that.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's what I,
And I know that,
First
yeah,
set.
principles were brought up, but I think it's even further than that discussion. Just a larger
So
look,
what's-
and that triggered Jenna.
Find out.
I would just say that a lot of that's bargainable, Dawn, so we need to be thoughtful about that. And we do have language in the teacher agreement about evaluation and about whether or not the evaluator can conduct student or parent surveys without the teacher's consent, and they're not able to do that. We've got bargain language around that.
but we're not talking about principals.
I know, but you mentioned sort of more systemic discussions, and the principals are represented by an association and probably would have some input on facets of their evaluation system. I do want to point out that the current evaluation system is 100% compliant with the statute in terms of the evaluation framework. So, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that they have an association. They're registered with the state as a bargaining unit, and so we would have to discuss those things with them. So.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what that looks like and perhaps have a discussion about how we could improve that.
Sure, I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
And I love it that we'd be offering you really great job security with that, and if we were to suggest changes.
We've been talking about this at a broader level. I guess I think that Larry, in your evaluation, we had talked about how do we get community input? That's part of what our rubric in your evaluation talks about, and we've grappled with that at the superintendent level. Now I'm hearing it at a principal level. I don't know if that's with all the principals or if it's just in this case. So I'm not looking to evaluate this particular principal, and I would have to remove myself from that anyway because I'm at Kokanee Elementary, so I don't feel like I could enter into that conversation. But at a broader level, what are we doing to get community input, taxpayer input?
Taxpayer input, we do the survey, 2-3 times a year, where we go
For
out to-
specific
Oh, for
principal
specific, yeah.
evaluations, yeah.
So I don't know if general taxpayers would know a principal enough to
I don't know.
respond specifically.
And so what would be the intent of the discussion? How? I need to define the discussion. Community-wide input and evaluations.
That sounds like a good.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, or is it one kind of 25% of the principal's evaluation is the community piece?
No.
Oh, okay.
This feels
Late at night,
sort
I don't
of
know how
like,
good I'll be.
well, this feels very much like the discussion that we would be wanting to have. I mean, when we have staff members coming up, and I don't mind it going on in a public meeting or in a study session, but it feels like we're having this discussion now instead of placing it on as a future agenda item. I'm not opposed to placing it on as a future agenda item, but it's feeling more and more like that, and it's 9:10.
And some of these families may have wanted to be here for this portion, I think.
So did you have a clarifying
I asked
thing to ask?
Yes.
specifically.
So they're
And maybe I
evaluated-
shouldn't have asked that until we gave notice.
Okay, do you want me to answer
Please
it or?
don't.
Yes.
So they're evaluated under 8 criteria, which are designated by the state. Criteria 7 has a community component to it. The RCW says that staff may give input into the principal's evaluation, but there is no requirement, nor is there any mention of community giving that. So the rubric describes what would be unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished in community engagement, and that uncovers everything from, communicates regularly in print and orally, holds regular meetings, etc., and we'll get you a copy of that rubric. But it's by no means a quarter of their evaluation,
Yeah, I'm
nor
sorry.
the community. There is no component that the community evaluates the principal.
So I'm just clarifying, the word community references an
The
evaluation
school
of
community.
community engagement
Yes.
by the principal. It's not a component that asks for community evaluation of the principal.
That's correct.
Okay.
So just to be clear, I have not read through this yet, so I'm just going based on what I've heard. That's why I think we need a discussion, and I feel like we're being unfair to the people. Maybe they needed to hear part of this discussion, so.
Okay, well, they've
That I-
seen,
and I
in
asked
our
you,
meeting,
I
just
asked
to
you.
clarify, in our meeting, they were given all that information, so they have exactly what I just said in print, and I gave it to them, so.
I'm gonna ask that question, can you put that same question I asked in a board briefing?
Certainly.
Thank you.
And so what would be the desired outcome of the conversation? We're just having a free-form conversation about community-wide input and evaluations, or
Do we
what?
want to want to talk specifically about the principal evaluation? Is that?
I'm not clear on what you want as an agenda item, so just seeking clarity. Pardon?
No, I think we should.
Do you want to
I've tried.
read the information and then come back in September if you think we need a board discussion?
I feel like we just now had a discussion.
Okay, people answering your questions.
I took responsibility for the fact that I asked that. But that doesn't mean that I don't feel that I didn't do a disservice by not. That's why I kept trying to push it to an agenda item, but I kept being asked more and more questions.
All right, next item on the agenda is board member reports. We'll start with Dawn. Pass. Amy?
I don't have anything to add. I was at the Wall of Honor and the events, just a Schools Foundation meeting as they kicked off, got some new board members, which was great. Always do great work.
Sandy?
Attended the back to school fair, which had 800 families in attendance, which is a huge increase just from last year, let alone years past. So that was very exciting to see that many people participating in it. Wall of Honor is always a lovely ceremony, and looking forward to getting more than just Bachel graduates on it in the future.
Yeah, a few.
And then along with Director McCravey, the ALE Exit Conference, and again, huge kudos to all of the staff, Donna Tayo, Heather Miller, Carolyn O'Keefe, Lydia. I mean, there were so many people that did a marvelous job of making sure that we are doing, providing a fabulous service to students that need that alternative option without taking advantage of the situation. So heard good things from the auditors on that.
Graduation Alliance was part of that. Is that?
No, it's SAS.
Oh, excuse me.
It's SAS and North Shore Networks. It's the SAS students that are all online and North Shore Networks. My particular favorite factoid is that we have 0.067% of our students that are qualified as part of this ALE. There are districts that have 70% of their students, so they thought that was very cool, that we were clearly using it as a service for students that just needed an alternative way to receive their education. And
Be a
then,
red flag if it's 70%.
yeah, that is. And then been attending a number of back-to-school events, looking forward to next week, when the kiddos go back to school.
So my notes and the ESB don't match, so whoever, I don't know if it was Dawn or Kimberly that said pass with Rivers left. Did one of you have a
You
report?
mean your notes don't match?
Well, I have John, Kimberly, Amy, Sandy, me in the order, and on ESB it's a different order, so who did I miss?
Me. So for the, I've become a little sad about missing the back to school fair and the community work day, because both of them are on my church days. And so I can no longer participate in those, so I was sad to miss those. Did do the ALE conference, and to answer your question, Director Quinn, it was the academy is they're looking at that, because that was one of my questions, and so
Graduation Alliance?
the ALE auditor, thank you, will be looking at that in the future. They're actually only reviewing 2 districts right now in the state, as kind of get a handle on what they would be auditing on that program. And I thought that was interesting. That was an interesting factoid, as you say, to take away from it. And that's it.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Back to school fair, Sandy and I did the haircut room again, and 30 free haircuts were provided to families, and there could have been a whole lot more had there been more people. But Gina Juarez is really good about sending their beauty school students to provide the service. Really, and they do it so cheerfully too. It's really nice. And then I was able to serve at Community Serve Day yesterday at Arrowhead Elementary, and it's just so nice to see everybody out there working together, and it's very cool. I have no notes. Upcoming meetings you know about, so this meeting is adjourned.